The text came late at night. "Jenna, sweetheart, we need to talk about the trip. We've decided to postpone it until next year." I blinked at the message, my heart sinking. Postponed? We had been planning this trip for months, our first real family vacation in years. I had rearranged my work schedule, budgeted every penny, and counted down the days like a kid waiting for Christmas. I called my mom immediately. She sighed as she answered, "Jenna, I know you're disappointed, but things are just tight right now. We can't afford it." I swallowed hard. I understood money struggles. Really, I did. I had been working extra shifts at the bookstore, even offering to cover my own airfare just to make this trip happen. But something about the way she said it, like the decision had already been made, like my feelings didn't matter, felt like a slap in the face. "If it's about money, maybe we can find a cheaper hotel or shorten the trip," I suggested, desperate to salvage it. She hesitated for a second. I heard it. "Jenna," she said gently, "it's just not the right time. We'll make it happen next year. I promise. A promise." One I should have known better than to believe. 2 days later, I was scrolling through Instagram on my lunch break when my stomach dropped. There was a picture of my mom and dad on a beach, sun-kissed skin, drinks in their hands, the ocean glistening behind them under the afternoon sun. My heart pounded. I scrolled down, more photos. My brother Liam posing with his girlfriend on a boat. My parents at a seafood restaurant smiling over plates of lobster. And then, the caption that made my blood run cold. "Family time is priceless. Family time." Except I wasn't there, because, according to them, the trip had been postponed. I locked my phone and sat frozen at the cafe counter, my mind racing. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe it was a last-minute work thing. Maybe someone had gifted them the trip, but deep down, I knew the truth. They hadn't postponed anything. They had just decided that I wasn't part of it. That night, I didn't call my mom. I didn't comment on the post. Instead, I watched in silence as more photos poured in over the next few days. They went snorkeling, had bonfires on the beach, made memories without me. And as I stared at each picture, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about the trip. This was about all the times I had been the afterthought, all the birthdays they had forgotten, the holidays where my gifts were an afterthought, while Liam got exactly what he wanted, all the sacrifices I had made for them, ones they never even noticed. I clenched my jaw and took a deep breath. They thought I would be too hurt to say anything, that I would just let it go. But this time, I was done being the forgotten one. They didn't know I had seen the photos. So when they got home a week later, I was waiting, and I had a plan. I heard the taxi pull into the driveway and watched from the kitchen window as my mom, dad, and Liam stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them. They looked tired but happy, sun-kissed from their postponed trip. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. They didn't know I had seen the photos. Not yet. The front door swung open and my mom was the first to spot me. "Jenna," she said, her voice overly bright. "Oh, sweetheart, I missed you. How have you been?" I folded my arms. "Busy," I said flatly. My dad walked in behind her, setting his bags down. "That's good. How's work?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. Work. That was all I had done. Work and scroll through their pictures while pretending I didn't exist to them. Liam yawned, stretching his arms. "Man, I'm exhausted. Traveling takes it out of you." He turned to me with a smirk. "Hope you held down the fort while we were gone." My eyes snapped to him. While we were gone. Like it was normal. Like nothing was wrong. Like I hadn't spent the last week replaying their betrayal over and over. I took a deep breath. No more pretending. I turned to my mom, my voice eerily calm. "So, how was the trip?" She blinked, hesitating. "Oh, well, we just needed a little getaway. Nothing too special." Liar. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward them. The photo album, the beach selfie, the boat ride, the fancy dinner, and the caption that made my stomach turn all over again. "Family time is priceless." I tilted my head. "Looks special to me." Silence. Thick. Heavy. Then my mom let out a nervous laugh. "Jenna, just don't." I cut her off, my voice sharp, cold. My dad cleared his throat. "Look, sweetheart, it wasn't." "Stop," I said, my voice rising. "Just tell me the truth. You never postponed the trip. You just didn't want me there." I saw the guilt flash across my mom's face, but she quickly masked it with a weak excuse. "It wasn't like that, honey. We just thought." "What? That I wouldn't notice?" I snapped. "That I wouldn't see the pictures?" That I'd be stupid enough to believe your lie? Liam groaned, rolling his eyes. Oh my God, Jenna, are you seriously making this a big deal? It was just a trip. Just a trip. The words hit me like a slap. A trip that I planned, that I saved up for, that I was supposed to be a part of. I shook my head. You could have told me the truth. But instead, you lied. You made me feel like I wasn't worth bringing. Liam scoffed. You're being dramatic. I let out a bitter laugh. No, Liam, I'm finally being honest. My mom stepped forward, reaching for my hand. Jenna, please, I pulled away. No, not this time. They needed to hear this. This isn't just about the trip. It's about every single time I've been treated like I don't matter. Every holiday where Liam got exactly what he wanted, and I got whatever was convenient. Every time I put you guys first and you didn't even notice. I swallowed hard, my voice shaking. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I gave enough, I'd finally be enough for you. But I never was I? Silence. Finally, my mom sighed. Jenna, it's not like we love Liam more than you. I let out a small, bitter smile. Maybe you don't, but it sure feels that way. Another silence. And that was my answer. I stood there, arms crossed, as the weight of my own words settled between us. My mom's eyes shimmered. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. My dad rubbed a hand over his face, looking anywhere but at me. And Liam? He just scoffed, shaking his head like I was the one being unreasonable. Look, Liam muttered, grabbing his suitcase. This is exhausting. I'm going to bed. And just like that, he walked away. No apology, no guilt, just nothing. My mom finally found her voice. Jenna, sweetheart, let's just sit down and talk. No. My voice was sharp, final. I wasn't doing this. Not tonight. Not after everything. I turned on my heel and walked out the front door. My mom called after me, but I didn't stop. The night air was cool against my heated skin as I crossed the driveway, barely noticing where I was going. My feet carried me down the street, past familiar houses, past the places I once called home. I ended up at the small park near our neighborhood, sitting on the old swing set, staring at the empty space in front of me. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but underneath it was something heavier, hurt. I had always known I wasn't the favorite, but this was different. This was them outright choosing a life without me in it. My phone buzzed in my lap. Mom, Jenna, please come back. Let's talk. Dad, you're being emotional. Let's not make this a big deal. And then, of course, Liam had to add his 2 cents. Liam, you're embarrassing yourself. I stared at the messages, my chest tightening. They still didn't get it. I could have responded. I could have let them pull me back into the same old cycle. But instead, I did something I had never done before. I turned off my phone. For the first time, I let the silence do the talking. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I crashed at my best friend's apartment. Claire didn't ask any questions at first. She just opened the door, took one look at me, and handed me a pint of ice cream. Let me guess, she said, sitting beside me on the couch. It's about your family. I let out a humorless laugh. Isn't it always? She didn't push. She just let me sit there, picking at my ice cream, while my mind raced through every conversation, every moment, every sign I should have seen before now. After a long silence, she finally spoke. You know, Claire said, stretching her legs out, I always wondered why you worked so hard to make them happy. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? She gave me a look. Come on, Jenna. You bend over backwards for them. Always have. You plan their birthdays, help out when they need something. Even this trip, you worked extra shifts to make it happen. And for what? They don't do the same for you. One swallowed hard. They're my family. And Claire's voice was soft but firm. That doesn't mean they get to treat you like this. I hated that she was right. Because deep down, I had always known this wasn't just about the trip. It was about a pattern, a lifetime of being the afterthought. And I was finally tired of pretending it didn't hurt. The next morning, I went back home. Not because I was ready to forgive them, but because I needed to get my things. I wasn't sure what my plan was, but I knew one thing. I needed space. When I walked through the front door, my mom was waiting in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She looked like she hadn't slept. Jenna, she started, voice cautious. I'm so glad you're back. We need to talk. I shook my head. I'm not back. I just came to pack a few things. She blinked. Pack? Where are you going? Claire's for now. I met her gaze, letting the words sink in. I need some time. She looked like I had slapped her. Jenna, come on. We didn't mean to hurt you. I let out a slow breath. That's the thing, Mom. You didn't even think about me enough to hurt me on purpose. I wasn't part of the equation at all. Silence. My dad walked in, already sighing like this conversation was an inconvenience. Jenna, you're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. I clenched my jaw. It's a big deal to me. All right, he said, holding his hands up. Then what do you want from us? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. There. Can we move on now? I stared at him, feeling the words land hollow in my chest. They still didn't get it. You don't get to decide when this is over. My voice was quieter now, but no less firm. You don't get to act like a half-hearted apology fixes everything. Because it doesn't. Liam walked in, rolling his eyes. Are we seriously still talking about this? I let out a bitter laugh. You know what? No, we're not. And with that, I turned and walked upstairs to my room. I packed a bag in silence, folding clothes with slow, deliberate movements. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for them to fix things. I was fixing things for myself. When I came back downstairs, my mom was waiting by the door, eyes red-rimmed. How long will you be gone? She asked. I met her gaze. I don't know. She nodded, swallowing hard. I want you to know we love you, Jenna. I took a slow breath, my fingers tightening around my bag strap. I wish that was enough. And then, without another word, I walked out the door. Leaving home should have felt heavier, but as I stepped out of the house, my bag slung over my shoulder, I felt something else entirely. Relief. For the first time, I wasn't trying to fix things. I wasn't making excuses for them or waiting for an apology that meant something. I was just leaving. Claire was waiting in her car at the curb, watching me through the windshield. As I climbed into the passenger seat, she didn't say a word, just turned up the music and started driving. You good? She finally asked, after a few minutes of silence. I let out a breath. I don't know. She nodded like she understood, because she did. So what now? She asked. That was the real question, wasn't it? What now? I had spent my whole life wrapped up in my family, orbiting around their needs, their plans, their expectations. Without them, without trying to make myself fit into their lives, what was left? I stared out the window, the familiar streets blurring past. I think I just want to exist for a while, I admitted. Without worrying about what they want from me, Claire grinned. I like the sound of that. The first few days at Claire's felt strange, like I was floating outside my own life. I still checked my phone more than I wanted to admit, expecting a message that never came. My mom texted once, just a simple I love you, but I didn't reply. I wasn't ready. Instead, I focused on myself for once. Claire, being the best friend that she was, refused to let me wallow. Okay, she announced on the third day. You have two options. We can sit here eating ice cream and watching terrible reality TV forever, or we can do something. I raised a brow. Like what? She grinned. Like anything. Something just for you. The words settled into my chest, something shifting deep inside me. Something just for me. I had never really thought about that before. You always wanted to take that art class, Claire reminded me. Or go on that solo trip. Or oh, what about salsa dancing? You said you wanted to try that once. I laughed. I was drunk when I said that. Still counts. She nudged my arm. Come on, Jenna. Pick something. Just one thing. I hesitated for only a second before the answer came. The road trip. Her eyes lit up. The one you always talked about? I nodded. I had dreamed about it for years, packing up and driving with no real destination, just the open road and time to breathe. But there had always been something stopping me. Work, responsibilities, my family needing me. But now there was nothing in my way. Let's do it. Planning was easy, too easy. Within days, we had a loose route mapped out, a mix of places I had always wanted to see and random stops that sounded interesting. Claire could only join for the first leg of the trip, but that was fine, because this trip wasn't about running away. It was about finally going towards something. The night before we left, I sat on the balcony of Claire's apartment, staring at my phone. My family hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't reached out beyond that one message from my mom. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it still hurt. They're waiting for me to cave. That was always how it worked. I would be the first to reach out, the one to smooth things over, to make it easy for them. But not this time. This time, they could sit with the silence. I turned off my phone, letting the night wrap around me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The first few days of the road trip were exactly what I needed. The wind in my hair, the music blasting, the endless stretch of road ahead. Claire was the perfect travel buddy singing off-key, making me laugh, reminding me that there was more to life than what I had left behind. "Okay," she said one afternoon as we sat at a gas station, stretching our legs. "Real talk. Are you going to talk to them?" I exhaled slowly. "I don't know." She didn't push, just sipped her drink. "I think they expect you to forgive them like you always do." "Probably." She glanced at me. "Do you want to?" I thought about that for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been. It wasn't a fire burning in my chest. It was something quieter now, an ache, a realization. I missed my family, but I also knew that missing them wasn't the same as trusting them. "I don't know if I can." Claire nodded. "That's okay too." After a week on the road, Claire had to head back home, leaving me on my own. I should have been nervous, but as I watched her drive away, all I felt was excitement. This was mine. I spent my days however I wanted, visiting small towns, hiking trails, sitting in diners with a book and a cup of coffee, just existing in a way I never had before. And the more time passed, the more I realized something. I wasn't waiting for them anymore. For so long, I had lived in this space of wanting them to see me, to include me, to make me feel like I belonged. But now I was learning to belong to myself. One evening, as I sat by a quiet lake, watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed. I hesitated before checking it. A message from my mom. "Mom, Jenna, the first to feel awful. I can't sleep knowing you're upset with us. Please call me." I stared at the screen. For a split second, I almost replied. Almost. But then I asked myself a question. If I had never seen the pictures, would she have ever told me the truth? The answer was painfully clear. I locked my phone and let the silence stretch on. The thing about silence is that it speaks louder than words. And my silence? It was deafening. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. At first, my mom sent messages every couple of days. Apologies, check-ins, half-hearted attempts to pull me back in. My dad didn't text at all. And Liam? He posted on social media like nothing had ever happened. I wasn't surprised. I had spent years being the one who reached out, the one who fixed things, the one who made everything easy for them. Now that I wasn't playing that role, they didn't know what to do. I thought about answering. More than once, I almost did. But every time, I remembered the way they had laughed, smiled, made memories without me. And I knew I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. The road stretched endlessly before me, the hum of the engine filling the silence. Being alone on the trip was different from being with Claire. There were no distractions, no conversations to keep my mind from wandering. Just me, the open road, and everything I had been trying not to think about. I pulled into a small town late one afternoon, the kind of place where everyone knew each other. It wasn't part of my original plan, but that was the thing. I didn't have a plan anymore. I found a little diner on the edge of town, the neon sign flickering as I stepped inside. The place smelled like coffee and old wood, the kind of warmth that made you feel like you belonged, even if you didn't. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a kind smile, poured me a cup of coffee without asking. "Passing through?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just driving." She gave me a knowing look. "Running from something or towards something?" I hesitated. "Maybe both." She hummed like she understood. "Well, whatever it is, take your time. The road waits." I sat there for a long time, stirring my coffee, thinking about her words. The road waits. But was I still running? Or was I finally learning to stand still? That night, I checked my phone for the first time in days. There was a new message from my dad. "Dad, Jenna, let's talk. Call me when you're ready." Not an apology, not an excuse, just a request. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was everything. But for the first time, he was the one reaching out. And that was new. I didn't answer, not yet, but I didn't delete it either. Progress, I supposed. I kept driving. Every mile put more distance between me and the person I used to be the one who waited, the one who chased, the one who tried so hard to be seen. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I wasn't trying to make them feel guilty. I wasn't trying to make them miss me. I was just living. And for the first time, that was enough. 3 weeks after I left home, I pulled into a motel somewhere in Colorado, exhausted from the drive. As I checked in, the receptionist handed me my key with a curious glance. "You've got visitors," she said. I frowned. "Visitors?" She nodded toward the lobby. "They've been waiting for a while." My stomach twisted. I turned slowly, heart pounding, and there they were. My mom, my dad, sitting in the corner of the lobby, looking more tired than I had ever seen them. I stood frozen in place, my fingers tightening around the motel key. For the first time, they had come to me. But was I ready to hear what they had to say? I stood there, rooted to the spot, my heart beat loud in my ears. My parents sat across the lobby, their suitcases beside them, their faces drawn with something I couldn't quite name. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Them showing up, apologizing, begging me to come home. Or maybe acting like nothing had ever happened, like I was the one being unreasonable. But now that they were here, I didn't know what to do. I could turn around, walk away, pretend I never saw them. But I was tired of pretending, so I took a slow breath and walked over. My mom looked up first. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but she hesitated. My dad cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. "You found me," I said, my voice calm, unreadable. My mom gave a weak smile. "You weren't exactly hiding. Did you come all this way just to tell me that?" My dad exhaled through his nose, rubbing his hands together. "We came to talk." I pulled out the chair across from them, but didn't sit yet. "Why now?" "Because you didn't come back," my mom admitted. "You've never stayed mad this long." I swallowed hard. Maybe because I've never let myself be mad before. Silence stretched between us. I watched them, waiting, giving them space to say whatever it was they had come all this way to say. My dad was the first to speak. "We screwed up." I blinked. I hadn't expected him to say that. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When we said the trip was postponed, it was a lie." Just hearing him say it so plainly, without excuses, hit me harder than I expected. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "We didn't think it would hurt you this much," he admitted. "We thought, I don't know, that you'd understand." That word, understand. They had used it before, in texts, in conversations. In every moment they had dismissed my feelings. "Understand what?" I asked, my voice steady. My mom wrung her hands. "That we didn't do it to hurt you." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You didn't think about me enough for it to be about hurting me." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't deny it. My dad exhaled. "We were wrong." Another surprise. "If you hadn't seen the pictures," I asked, looking between them, "would you have ever told me the truth?" Neither of them answered. And that was my answer. I nodded slowly. "That's what hurts the most, you know? Not just that you left me out, but that if I hadn't caught you, you never would have said anything." My mom wiped at her eyes. "I don't know how to fix this, Jenna." I sat back, crossing my arms. "Maybe you can't." She flinched, but I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just done pretending that words were enough. "I don't want another half-hearted apology," I continued. "I don't want a promise you won't keep. If you actually want to fix this, you're going to have to prove it." My dad nodded, slow and thoughtful. "How?" "That's up to you." Another silence. A heavy one. Then, finally, my mom nodded. "Okay." And just like that, the weight of expectation lifted from my shoulders. Because for the first time, it wasn't my responsibility to fix things. I didn't invite them to stay. They had come all this way to see me, but I wasn't ready to let them back in. So I stood, slung my bag over my shoulder, and said, "I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk again." My mom swallowed. "That's fair." I walked away without looking back. And for the first time, I felt free. I didn't speak to my parents for weeks after that night in the motel lobby. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing to fix things. I wasn't waiting for them to reach out. I wasn't replaying our conversations in my head, wondering if I should have said more or less. I was just living, and it felt good. The road stretched on, and I kept driving. I hiked through canyons, stood at the edge of oceans, watched the sunrise from mountaintops. I ate at diners where nobody knew my name, sat in bookstores for hours, getting lost in stories that weren't mine. Somewhere along the way, I realized something. I didn't feel lost anymore. I wasn't waiting to be included. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. One afternoon, in a small coffee shop in Oregon, my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. "Mom, I don't know if you'll respond, but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not just for the trip. For all of it." I stared at the screen, something tight pressing against my ribs. "Mom, I didn't see it before. How much you did for us. How much we took for granted. But I see it now, and I hope one day you'll let us prove it to you." I exhaled slowly. The words felt different this time. They weren't asking me to come home, weren't making excuses, just acknowledging the truth. For the first time, I believed her. I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit, carrying it with me as I finished my trip. Because this wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. And when I was ready, really ready, I would decide what came next. Months later, I stood at my own front door, my own apartment, my own space, a life I had built for myself. I pulled out my phone, hesitating only a second before typing. "Me, I'm ready to talk." And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because no matter what happened, I knew one thing for sure. I was enough. Always had been. And finally, I believed it. Story 2. The room was frigid the instant the will turned red. Just as I was beginning to deal with the loss of my grandpa, my mother got up, put a strong hand on her husband's arm, and spoke in a calm, confident voice. "Richard will be running the business from now on." I blinked. Richard? My mother married my stepfather less than a year ago. The man who had been casually remarking for the last 6 months that a person my age was incapable of handling actual responsibilities. I surveyed the space. Nobody else appeared shocked, as though this had already been determined. My aunts, uncles, and even a few of the board members in attendance were mute. However, there was one minor issue with my mother's self-assured declaration. A week before to the funeral, I was now the owner of the business. I held my grandfather's frail hand as I sat next to his hospital bed. "The only one I trust is you, Mia." His voice was no more than a whisper as he rasped. "My eyes have been stinging from tears throughout my life. The only person who ever really believed in me was Grandpa." In contrast, my mother had expressed her disapproval in me. "Don't allow them to steal what I created." With a small tightening of his hold, he spoke. "They'll give it a go, as well as when they do. Don't be scared. I've got everything ready." I was unable to decipher his meaning. Not yet, anyhow. My mother gazed hopefully at the lawyer as he cleared his throat and repositioned his spectacles, awaiting confirmation that her husband would be taking over her grandfather's business. Mr. Whitmore's entire estate, including all shares in Whitmore Industries, has been left to his granddaughter, Mia Whitmore, the lawyer said, glancing at me. The quiet was overwhelming. Every eye in the room jerked in my direction. It must be an error. With a clipped voice, my mother spoke. "He intended to let me handle it. The attorney didn't panic. There isn't a mistake, I promise. The only heir is Mia, with immediate effect. The business is owned by her. It was Richard who reacted first." He was giggling to himself as if this were a joke. "You can't be serious, darling," he said, staring at me as if I were a kid dressing up. "A company this size needs actual experience. This isn't a school assignment." I watched them in silence. Then, as though she had finally heard the lawyer's words, a look of rage twisted my mother's face. She spat. "If that's the case, then get out of our house right away." I gazed at her. "Our house?" I couldn't help it. I actually laughed. "You mean Grandpa's house?" I said, shaking my head. "You might want to read that a little more carefully, Mom, because something tells me there's another surprise waiting for you." The startled stillness in the room stretched painfully. My mother's face had gone white with wrath. Her lips pushed into a narrow line, as if she were physically holding back a scream. Richard, standing alongside her, kept darting between me and the lawyer, his confidence shaking for the first time. I had expected opposition. I just hadn't anticipated it this soon. "You're kidding," my mother finally hissed, voice quiet but loaded with hatred. "Grandpa would never do this. He would never leave you in power over me." The lawyer casually changed his papers, seemingly unaffected. Mr. Whitmore made his intentions quite apparent. "Mia is the only beneficiary of his estate, including his house, all financial assets, and 100% of Whitmore Industries shares." I hardly had time for my own processing. I was aware of the business, but not the home. his property, or anything else. My mother must have recognized this at the same moment as me, since her face darkened. "If that's the case," she said in a cool, collected tone, "then you're not welcome in this house anymore. Gather your belongings and head off right now." It became considerably silent in the room. It was nearly humorous. Was one actually evicted from my own house by her? Trying not to giggle again, I let out a deep sigh. "I believe you misinterpreted something, Mom. This residence, I now own it." I was left to do it by Grandpa. Her expression wavered as if she was having trouble understanding what was being said. "That's ridiculous. Our family's residence is here. As of right moment, I am the sole legal family member in possession of it." I fired back. At last, Richard intervened, feigning a patronizing grin. He added in that condescending tone he often employed, "Mia, sweetheart, you're still young. You have no idea how much work it takes to manage a business like this. It goes beyond a simple inheritance. It's an obligation. I have years of expertise, as does your mother. Let us assist you." Their actual plan was there. It has nothing to do with family. It has to do with control. They had anticipated that my mother would receive the business. Richard was meant to be in control, and she was supposed to sign it over to him. However, I was the only thing between him and Grandpa's kingdom. He also believed he could use charm to persuade me to give it to him. I refused to turn away and crossed my arms. "Let me clarify. The instant you became aware that you were losing the business, my mother attempted to expel me from my own house. And now you're arguing that you ought to be in charge of everything? Do you believe I'm not smart?" Although he reddened, Richard maintained his false grin. "I am not saying that at all. I simply think, no, I believe I fully comprehend." I cut you off. "You thought your mother would inherit everything from your grandfather. It's likely that you two were already preparing your takeover strategy. Grandpa, however, saw straight through you. He left everything to me for that reason." My mom's hand crashed onto the table. Anger gave way to despair in her face. "You have no idea what you're doing, Mia." She lost her temper. "This industry is worth $1 billion. Running anything this large requires more than a fortunate inheritance." The attorney cleared his throat. In actuality, Mr. Whitmore had already taken steps to guarantee Mia a seamless transfer. My mom jerked her head in his direction. "What steps?" The attorney adjusted his spectacles. "A dependable group of advisors was chosen by Mr. Whitmore to supervise operations while Mia assumed her new position as CEO, since he anticipated that she could require direction. All legal documentation have already been completed, and the board has already been informed." A flood of relief washed over me. Grandpa had anticipated this. He made sure I wouldn't be alone since he knew they would try to control me. Richard's face grew serious. His courteous demeanor was faltering. He lowered his voice and turned to face my mother. I could still hear him, though. "We can combat this." The attorney, however, shook his head. "You can't. The will is unchangeable. Nothing can be disputed." I saw my mother lose what little control she still had. She had ridiculed me for years, acting as though I were a letdown and an afterthought. She had nothing anymore, and she had never envisioned a world in which she was not in control. She gave me a look as though I had personally deceived her. It seemed as though I had taken something from her. Eventually, she remarked, "You're making a mistake. Do you consider this a win? Mia, managing a business is not a game. You will not succeed." I gazed at her while I allowed her words to sink in. Then, slowly, deliberately, with a smile, I bent over. "We shall see, I suppose." The tense atmosphere in the room was oppressive. My mother's well-groomed fingers curled into fists on the polished wood table as she glared at me. Richard took a rigid seat next to her. His jaw tightened as though he were suppressing an outburst. I could practically hear what they were thinking. This was not the intended course of events. In their ideal scheme, I had been the annoyance. They could ignore the easy target, the innocent girl. They were able to control. Grandpa, however, had seen right through them, and he had picked me for that reason. This is not logical. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was trembling with rage. I would never be subjected to this by Dad. His only daughter was me. How come he would exclude me from everything? Wondering the same thing, I turned to the lawyer. Even though Grandpa and I had always been close, I didn't think he would abandon her. The attorney folded his hands on the table and sighed thoughtfully. A letter outlining Mr. Whitmore's reasoning was left behind. If there was any confusion, he told me to read it. Carefully, he opened a sealed envelope he had taken out of his briefcase. I saw my mom move uncomfortably in her chair. The lawyer, Mia, read out loud, "I'm leaving if you're hearing this. And your mother is probably furious by now. She'll say it's unjust. She will say she should have inherited everything. In actuality, though, she long since forfeited that privilege." I gave my mom a quick look. Her face was unreadable as her lips formed a hard line. "Your mother never realized that power comes with responsibility. She always believed that wealth equated to power. I gave her a chance when she was younger, after the opportunity to demonstrate her suitability for managing the family business. Rather, she tried to cut corners for decades, prioritizing luxury over leadership and self-interest over sacrifice." The lawyer continued reading. "She always believed that being my daughter entitled her to my fortune. However, entitlement and earning something are not the same thing. And as for Richard, if he's in the room right now, I imagine he's trying to hide his true colors. But I know what he is. A leech. A man who saw an opportunity in my daughter's bank account and took it. I won't let my life's work fall into his hands." Richard's face turned beet red. I could see his rage simmering, but he stayed silent. "Mia, you are different," the letter continued. "You never expected anything from me. And that's exactly why I chose you. You worked hard. You learned. You respected the business for what it is. A legacy, not just a cash machine. I watched you grow, and I knew you are the only one I can trust to continue what I built." My heart pounded. Grandpa had seen me all those summers I had spent shadowing him in the office, taking notes, asking questions while my mother dismissed my curiosity as a childish phase. He had been watching. "I know this won't be easy," the letter continued. "Your mother will try to fight you. Richard will try to control you. But remember this, I didn't leave you alone. I left you with the tools to win." The lawyer finished reading and folded the letter neatly, placing it back in the envelope. Silence stretched between us. My mother was trembling with humiliation and rage. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "He was old. He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly when he wrote that." "Well, actually," the lawyer said unshaken, "Mr. Whitmore updated his will only 3 months ago. He was of completely sound mind, and legally there is nothing you can do to contest it." Richard stood abruptly, shoving his chair back. "We're wasting time here. Let's go." But my mother didn't move. She was still staring at me. "You really think you're going to handle all of this?" she asked coldly. "You think you're ready for it?" I retained her eyes. Yes, that night I hardly slept. I wasn't scared exactly, but the weight of it all. Owning an empire overnight, becoming CEO before I even had a chance to celebrate my 25th birthday, was daunting. Grandpa believed in me. That was the only thing holding me steady. The next morning, I went to the business headquarters for the first official board meeting since the will was read. My grandfather's trusted counselors were waiting for me, exactly like he promised. I wasn't alone, but when I climbed out of my car, a familiar voice cried out, "Mia!" I turned. My mother and Richard were standing near the entryway, their looks perfectly neutral. "We need to discuss," my mother said smoothly. "Just the three of us. No attorneys, no board members, only family." This wasn't about family, as I already understood. This was their final effort to achieve their goals. I also had no intention of letting them win. As my mother and Richard stood at the entrance to the offices of my firm, I observed them. The legal struggle was lost. The will was unchangeable. They couldn't compel me to give up the business. They were now attempting to bargain. I was aware that this was not a lighthearted discussion. This was their final attempt at dominance. "We must speak." With a hauntingly serene tone, my mother reiterated. I inhaled deeply. They no longer frightened me. "Then talk." "Flatly," I replied. Richard lowered his voice and looked around. "Not in this place. In a quiet setting. I ought to have left. I ought to have paid them no attention at all. However, I felt compelled to listen to them, if only to witness their next desperate action. I gave a nod. "All right." 5 minutes. We found ourselves inside the facility in a little meeting room. While my mother stood rigidly, Richard sat down as if he were supposed to, crossed arms, keeping hawk eye on me. "Mia, you are in over your head," she began, a quieter, even gentler voice now. "Grandpa burdened you with an impossible task. At your age, it is unreasonable to expect you to manage a $1 billion enterprise." I grinned. "And you believe Richard ought to take over?" "Indeed." Without hesitation, she said. "For the time being, however, He has leadership experience. He could teach you something." I shook my head and laughed a little. "Do you mean that I should be a nice little girl and give him everything?" Richard bent over. He practiced his smile. "Not quite. We're suggesting a collaboration." I arched an eyebrow. "You will remain the company's spokesperson," he said. "I'll take care of the day-to-day operations, but you'll still retain your title. There will be no pressure for you to cope with, no meetings of the board, no difficult choices. Just have fun with your life." I gazed at him. "Do you want me to serve as a symbol?" "It's the ideal configuration," my mom added her voice. "You won't have to worry about making blunders, and the board will feel more comfortable." "Mia, you're still quite young. A one poor choice might destroy everything Grandpa built." It was there. The deceit, the intimidation, the little jabs disguised as care. I reclined in my seat. "What do I get from this too?" Richard grinned as though he had just won a big sum of money. "Each month we will deposit a portion of the business's profits into your personal account. Money won't ever be a concern for you. You are free to travel, live your life as you like, and pursue your passions while the business continues to prosper." His confidence in this idea was nearly astounding. They really believed that I would simply roll over and give them the upper hand. I feigned to think about it. What would happen if I refused? My mom's face grew serious. "Mia, avoid being careless." "What does it mean?" "Implying that you will have adversaries." She spoke slowly. "You are not trusted by the board. If you don't cooperate, the shareholders will question everything you do. That pressure is not something we will shield you from." I cocked my head. "Do you mean to undermine me?" Richard grinned. He did not refute it. I exhaled deeply and got to my feet. I responded, "Thanks for the offer. I'll take a chance, though." My mom jumped out of her seat. "Don't do this, Mia." She caught me by the wrist as I turned to face the door. "Are you certain that you can win?" She gave a hiss. "You have no idea how this world functions. Do you believe that giving you this business was a favor from your grandfather? No. Your back became a target for him. The board will devour you. You will be buried by the investors. You require us." I gazed at her. "No, Mom," I muttered. "When I was a child, I needed you. You have to have faith in me. However, you never did. In order for you to steal what wasn't yours, you needed me to fail." I'm no longer a terrified young girl, though. She gave a little flinch. With his patience obviously running low, Richard got to his feet. "Mia, you're making a big mistake. When everything blows up in your face, don't come to us sobbing." I grinned. "I won't." After that, I left them permanently and left the room. They wouldn't give up easy, I knew. I could feel it in my bones as soon as I left my mother and Richard. I was correct. They were plotting something. 2 days later, the first attack occurred. As CEO, I entered my first formal board meeting, anticipating opposition. However, I was unprepared for the full-scale attack that was in store for me. The air in the room changed as soon as I sat down at the head of the long mahogany table. With hardly concealed mistrust, the board members, who were primarily men in their 50s and 60s and had served under my grandpa for many years, gazed at me. I hardly had time to say hello before one of them did. Mr. Holloway's face was tense as he leaned forward. "Mia, I believe we should confront the elephant in the room before we start." My hands are on the table. What kind of elephant is that? Before speaking, he looked at a few others, as though he wanted their approval. "Although your grandfather was a great guy, he made the rash choice to place you in charge. Let's face it, you lack the necessary credentials. You lack the necessary experience. And to be honest, we're worried." I maintained a neutral expression. Even though I had anticipated this, my chest still constricted as I heard it said so bluntly. "What are you worried about?" I inquired about your leadership skills. I saw Mr. Langston, another board member, idly looking at his phone. He then sighed a little and mumbled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The change was already reported by the media. The headlines don't present a positive image." I felt sick to my stomach. I carefully pulled up the news on my phone, which I had reached for under the table. I felt like I was being punched in the stomach by the headlines. "Inexperienced hands take control of the Whitmore empire. Is it something the IRS can manage? Business risk. When 25-year-old Mia Whitmore takes over as CEO, experts believe that Whitmore Industries will fail." My heart raced, but I made myself remain composed. This was no coincidence. It was sabotage. And I was quite sure I knew who was responsible. I had received 3 calls from the company's public relations staff by the end of the meeting. After entering my office and locking the door, I at last paid attention to their desperate messages. Mia. The media frenzy is intensifying. We require an answer. Investors are anxious. Stocks fell 3% this morning. We believe that negative remarks regarding your lack of experience were leaked by someone within the organization. A different leadership strategy is already being discussed by the board. I tightened my jaw. A different approach to leadership. A coup is the only possible explanation for that. I looked at my email. As it turned out, a formal request for a leadership vote to reconsider the company's course had already been made. Under its new direction, this was the work of my mother and Richard. I was too young to be able to do it, they had told the reporters. They were trying to force me out before I had a chance to establish myself, after whispering in the ears of apprehensive investors. I ought to have freaked out. Because I had been ready for this, I grinned, instead of feeling dejected. I grabbed my phone and called the one person who could put a stop to this. Before I heard a smooth, familiar voice. It rang twice. I wanted to know when you would call. I let out a sigh of relief. I need your assistance. My grandfather's most reliable business partner, Lucas Sinclair, was a financial whiz who once transformed a bankrupt firm into a $1 billion empire in a single day. More significantly, someone who shared my hatred of Richard and my mother. This must have to do with the media circus. His tone was laced with humor as he asked, "The board is already sharpening their blades. If your assumption is true, a vote is scheduled for 2 days from now." He hummed, "Traditional, corporate treachery. Then perhaps it's time to remind them of the reason your grandfather picked you." That evening, I saw Lucas in his private office, a modern glass-walled room with a view of the city skyline. He grinned after giving me a close examination. "You're not afraid?" "No." "Excellent. Let's crush them after that." We developed a plan throughout the course of the following several hours. The board meeting trap. Key investors who continued to believe in my grandfather's vision would be gathered by Lucas. Before the vote, they would publicly support me. 2. The takeover of the media. To combat the bad press, I would agree to an exclusive interview. We would discuss my credentials and my grandfather's own remarks on his selection of me. 3. Revealing the sabotage. Lucas has contacts who might identify the precise source of the destructive leaks. We would expose Richard and my mother if they were responsible. Public. It was almost midnight when we were done. I got up and shook Lucas's hand. "I'm grateful for this." "Don't thank me yet," he smiled. "When they learn you're not so easy to get rid of, wait till we see their expressions." The headlines were different the next morning. Mia Whitmore, the CEO, speaks forward. "Tonight, an exclusive interview will air. As investors offer support, Whitmore Industries stock stabilizes. Who is the true perpetrator of the slander campaign? Corporate backstabbing is allegedly at work." I watched from my desk as things started to go my way. However, I felt confident that this was not yet the end. My mother and Richard weren't going to see their plan go apart. I had to be prepared for their next move since they were going to fight dirty. It was the morning of the board vote. I was standing outside Whitmore Industries' enormous glass doors, gazing up at my own tall skyscraper. Everything would be decided now. I had to show that Grandpa had made the correct decision, or else I would be kicked out before I could take the lead. And I was certain of one thing. My mother and Richard refused to be fair. There were several people in the boardroom. Powerful men and women occupied every place around the long table, the majority of whom had been faithful to my grandpa for many years. Mr. Holloway, the same board member who had questioned my leadership only days before, was seated at the head of the table. "Let's start with a vote," he said. "Many of you are aware that questions have been raised over Mia Whitmore's capacity to serve as this company's leader. We will now talk about an alternate leadership plan that has been suggested by a number of members." Richard and my mother entered as the doors opened. They had been preparing for this moment the entire time, so I wasn't shocked. As though he were already in command, Richard cleared his throat. "Let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen. This business needs years of experience to run, and even though we all admire Mia, he feigned a grin for me. What's beneficial for the business must come first." I saw him pace as if delivering a prepared speech. "I've been there before. I am familiar with the business. I have a clear idea of what the future holds. I'm suggesting that I become the new CEO because of this." As a figurehead, Mia continues to be involved. The Whitmore Industries public persona. Smug as if the sale had already been made, he sat down. Before speaking, I waited for a time for the stillness to end. I responded in a calm voice. It's funny, Richard, because in your private chats, I recall you expressing something quite different. He twitched his face. I'm sorry. Lucas was seated next to me as I turned to face him. After setting a folder on the table, he distributed it among the board members. Richard and my mother have been conspiring behind the scenes to undermine my leadership for the last week. However, they did more than simply provide the media misleading information. They also made an effort to damage the business itself. When the board members accessed the folder, they discovered emails, text messages, and phone logs that demonstrated Richard had been aggressively reaching out to rivals in an attempt to negotiate agreements that would have weakened Whitmore Industries' position in the market. As Mr. Holloway read, his countenance grew gloomy. What is this? He made a demand. Evidence? Smoothly, Lucas remarked. Evidence that Richard has been deliberately acting against the interests of the business. He had no desire to salvage the business. He intended to take advantage of it. Richard's cheeks flushed. This is ridiculous. You cannot demonstrate. Well, we can, since we also tracked down the media leaks, I interrupted. And you know what? A private email account that was registered in Richard's name was the source. There were whispers in the boardroom. My mother glared at me as she abruptly got to her feet. Mia, enough. She lost her temper. You're acting absurdly. You're terrified, so you're simply trying to make him appear awful. I grinned. Mom, I don't have to ruin his reputation. That was his own doing. To argue, she opened her mouth. However, Mr. Holloway forcefully hit the table with his hand. That's sufficient, he answered icily. He looked across at Richard. His face was filled with disdain. You pretended to be the company's savior while actually conspiring against it. You are not qualified for any leadership role based on that alone. I sat back and saw Richard's face light up with terror. He became aware that he had lost for the first time. Voting is about to begin. Mr. Holloway spoke in a piercing tone. The board members looked at each other. Then they lifted their hands in my favor, one by one. The last count, unanimous. I was formally acknowledged as Whitmore Industries' legitimate CEO. My chest felt lighter than it had in weeks as I let it out. It was done. Within an hour, Richard was led out of the premises by security. My mom trailed after him, embarrassed. Before she left, she murmured, Mia, you'll regret this. I knew the truth, so I didn't answer. My only regret was that I had trusted her for so long. Lucas smirked with satisfaction when he joined me in my office later that evening. You did well, young one. Oh, he said, your granddad would be pleased. I grinned. I'm grateful for everything, Lucas. Don't bring it up. He stretched as he stood. Go rejoice now. You deserved it. I was speaking to a crowded audience from a platform a year after I had taken over the firm. When I was selected by my grandpa to lead Whitmore Industries, I was doubted by many. I was too young to be inexperienced, they argued. I looked down at the bright headline of the business magazine in front of me. The CEO who disproved them all was Mia Whitmore. I went on to say that they were unaware that age isn't a factor in success. It all comes down to readiness, tenacity, and the capacity to climb. While others anticipate your fall, I grinned because I had one and had created my own legacy, and the audience cheered. Story 3, His Cheating Fiancé, Screwed a DJ, is the title of this tale. Our wedding is one day away. I thus abandoned her at the altar and departed with her sexy bridesmaid. Okay, folks, this is going to be a lengthy one throwaway account for obvious reasons. I'm a 32-year-old man. I never imagined that I would be among the men who write on Reddit about romantic drama, but my life has been nothing short of a vengeance movie over the past several months. Before I start talking about the complete mess that was my wedding day, or, I suppose, my almost wedding day, I'll tell you the history. Val and I had so been dating for 3 years. At my friend Mike's house party, I got to know her. One of those, you must come, dude. You'll typically wind up standing in the corner, sipping beer, and looking at your phone during these epic-style events. However, things were different this time. Val was this absolute smoke show. Pharmaceutical representative, I understand how that may seem, but I'm being straightforward here. Good score of 9 out of 10. Depending on the source, it may even be a 10. A great physique with long dark hair, She did CrossFit, yes. How did you guess? I was out of my league, and this smile actually made other males walk into walls. If I'm telling the truth, on a good day, I'm around a solid 6. And if I'm dressed well and the lighting is nice, I may even be 7. I still recall the first time I saw her. Mike and she were fighting over a television program. It was becoming really awful. I suppose my first warning sign should have been that she was Team Walter White all the way through. And I just kind of stepped into the discussion. Before I know it, we've been discussing everything from drugs and sports to whether or not pineapple belongs on pizza for 3 hours. I'm not fought by it. At the end of the night, I got her number. The following weekend, I took her out, and that was about it. Sometimes you simply click with someone, don't you? Like, everything is so simple, correct? Yes. We were like that. That's what I believed, anyhow. After 3 years, I felt that our relationship was doing pretty darn well. After a year, we moved in together, got a downtown apartment that was just beyond of our price range. Before everything went to wrong, I adopted this jerk of a cat named Zeus, who detested everyone but herself, and began constructing what I believed would be our life together. I gave it my all. I took care of the small things. Flowers at random, just for fun. Unexpected. Coffee is delivered to her workplace, and adorable messages are left about the flat. Every unique event, you wager. I really went all out. Anniversaries and birthdays. The stupid tiny monthly ones too. I made sure she felt loved at the beginning. She enjoyed upscale items. And while I may have complained about it, I still managed to make it happen. Because when you love someone, you do that. I believed that I was creating memories, creating something tangible, and establishing the groundwork for our future. I proposed last year at this fancy rooftop restaurant, spent around 3 months' worth of pay on the ring. Yes, I am aware of it, but I wanted to please her, because she had high-end tastes. Yes, she answered, crying. Uploaded almost 50 photos on Instagram. The normal things, you know. She said in her post that she had met her true love and was eager to spend the rest of her life with them. Well, that matured like milk in a hot vehicle. There was a lot of planning involved in the wedding. I won't lie. Val want perfection in everything. And I mean it when I say perfect. We're talking about more than 200 people. Fancy venue at this historic hotel downtown. Dinner is served in 5 courses. Open bar on the top tier. The process. The expense was greatly assisted by her parents. Even while we are grateful for it today, it was still making a significant impact on our savings. But I didn't mind. All I felt was joy. She was content. Do you know? I mean, having a cookout after being married at the courthouse would have been awesome. However, I wanted to give her the wedding of her dreams. In addition, I can see how thrilled she is about cake sampling, floral arrangements, and whatever the fuck a charger plate is. It was adorable. After work, she would spend hours on Pinterest, showcasing all of these ideas and getting excited about each and every detail. Everything was moving too easily. Now looking back, it should have been obvious to me that something would go wrong. The strange thing is that I still can't really say when I first started to feel strange. It was like, have you ever had the feeling that something is off, but you're not quite sure what it is? Like when you forget to turn off the stove before leaving for work. However, multiply that by a factor of 100. About a month prior to the wedding, I began to notice small details. At first, nothing significant. She was staying out later than usual and going out more with her friends, using her phone in an odd way. Every Reddit post about cheating is the same old shit. That stuff is ignored when you're in it. Planning a fucking wedding and getting ready to start a life with someone. You justify yourself. All she's worried about is the wedding. She needs to release her tension. Man, I'm being paranoid. I was a complete fool. About 10 days before to the wedding, Val informs me that she would be attending this girl's night at Warehouse 13. If you're not from the area, Warehouse 13 is this enormous repurposed industrial building where these enormous parties are held, like the kind of place you enter at 11 o'clock at night. Subsequently, it is 6 a.m. and you've lost a shoe type thing. At first, I didn't give it much thought. Val had been worried out about the wedding, or so I thought. And her friends wanted to do this kind of pre-bachelorette party thing, since her actual bachelorette was going to be pretty tame wine tasting with her mom and aunts there. You know how it goes. Plus, Her best friend Megan was supposedly the one organizing it, and Megan's usually pretty responsible. Usually Val gets all suited up for this stuff. And when I say dressed up, I mean like festival wear type things, tiny crop top, those glittery high-waisted shorts that practically display your whole ass glitter everywhere. I remember joking like, dang, trying to find Husband Hubbard 2 already, and she felt sort of strange about it but played it off. It should have been a warning sign, but I was still acting like a fool and still trusted my fiancé. She leaves at about 9 o'clock with Megan, and a couple other gals text me at midnight saying everything's wonderful. She is enjoying herself and misses me. All of that romantic nonsense. Then, until around 6:30 a.m., there was radio quiet. They said they lost track of time when she stumbled into the room. Her phone died. The typical justifications. I saw that part of her glitter makeup was smudged, but I suppose that's normal for a rave. False. So fucking incorrect. Fast forward to a week before the wedding. At work, I'm making an effort to concentrate on this project's due date, despite the fact that everything related to the wedding has left my head absolutely burned out. My phone is buzzing. Chris is my boy. Chris doesn't usually call during business hours unless there's a problem. I thus realized that this would not work well. He begins, and I can tell by the tone of his voice that I'm going to hear something that I'd rather not hear. Listen, guy, that night my cousin DJ was at Warehouse 13, and I didn't know how to tell you that. My fucking stomach fell. A DJ is a person who essentially observes everything, knows everyone, and lives in the rave environment. He reportedly witnessed a lot. DJ claims that Val wasn't only dancing with the females. This guy was the object of her attention. There's a DJ named Voltage, or something like that. Who the hell calls themselves Voltage, really? Not like regular dancing, either. We are conversing, working, and figuring everything out. However, things improve. Even worse. Around 3 in the morning, the DJ noticed them vanish inside the DJ booth area. About 45 minutes later, they emerged. This electric jerk was looking so proud of himself while Val was mending her shorts. Very subtle, correct? I'm sitting at my office, trying not to punch a wall or throw up, or both. All I can hear is this ringing in my ears while Chris continues to speak. Do you know how it feels when everything in your universe suddenly changes? As if all you believed to be true were lies? Yes, that. There's more, though. Chris had previously done some research, since he is the true MVP buddy that he is. Turns out this wasn't the first time Val had been to one of Voltage's. Demonstrates that he discovered images on Instagram from a few months ago. Val in the throng. In sum, it's always right up front. I had never seen her wearing a glow-in-the-dark necklace before. Apparently it's like a VIP thing that gets you access the DJ section. I was in a fog for the remainder of that day, simply browsing Facebook and Instagram like a maniacal investigator. More photos from that evening were discovered. In the backdrop of other people's narratives is Val, getting to know this person really well. He is just what you would expect. Tall, tatted up, man bun wearing douche who probably thinks pressing play on a MacBook makes him a musician. The worst part in every pic. She wears her engagement ring in every video. The one she said was ideal. The one I had been saving for months. The one she had always dreamt about. I did not immediately confront her. Something in me suddenly exploded. We could play games if she wanted to. So I started making plans rather than losing it or confronting her. And I went into full detective mode because I was going to turn pro. Let me tell you, that shit hits you like a truck when you start genuinely looking for red flags rather than ignoring them. First thing I did was check our joint credit card statements. Yes, we had a combined wedding expenditure account. Another excellent choice. Found many charges from clubs and bars on nights. She was apparently wedding planning with her buddies. Like, unless David's nuptials relocation to a nightclub, something wasn't adding up. This is when Jessica enters the picture. Brief history. Although they weren't very close, Jessica was one of Val's bridesmaids. Val just asked her because it would have been embarrassing not to, and they worked together. I had always thought Jessica was a smoke show redhead, but I was faithful, unlike other people, so I didn't take any action. I decided to reach out to Jessica because she always looked clueless, less caught up in Val's BBs than the other bridesmaids. Additionally, She had been behaving strangely throughout the previous wedding celebrations, as if she knew something, but was unable to express it. I texted her asking if she had a moment to chat. "Val is the subject," she said. It turns out that Jessica had sensed something was wrong for weeks before they finally found it out. She was talking to this attractive DJ about whom Val had been boasting, showing her their trash and direct messages. But the point is, Val told Jessica that we had an arrangement and that I was fine with her having fun before the wedding. Please pardon me. What? Yes. My charming fiancé has been claiming to be upfront with everyone about our relationship. It's new to me. Jessica claims that in order to defend her hookup with Voltage, Val had been spreading this falsehood to a number of individuals. Also shown some of Jessica's texts, in which she mentioned meeting up with him following their honeymoon. The fucking boldness. Jessica, however, had screenshots. Many screenshots. Val and Voltage had been texting one other for months. She informed me she was at a pharmaceutical conference in Vegas in March, so it seems they met at another party. Since then, they had been dating intermittently, but as the wedding drew nearer, their relationship became increasingly serious. A few of their texts, highlights. "You will cringe at this shit. I warn you. Val is really excited to meet you this evening. Reserve a place for me in the booth. Voltage. Have a special gift for you, sweetie. Val. Better than the last time. Voltage. You are aware of it. Don't forget to bring your glittery attire. And my particular fave, Val. Before I have to be a decent wife, I'm kind of eager to be a naughty girl, haha. For 3 years of my life, I longed to vomit. $15,000 ring. This is her true opinion of our relationship, based on all of the plans we made." After enjoying herself, she had a dull duty to complete. Jessica was angry too. Evidently, Val had been ridiculing me in front of her other pals, referring to me as trustworthy and secure as if I were a fucking Honda Civic or something. Said she was settling down with me since I had a nice career and would be a good dad. With DJ stuff, she's out there having the time of her life at festivals. I began conspiring with Jessica at that point. I was done being the trustworthy fallback, and she was done with Val's two-faced lads. We went through all the evidence and made plans on how to address this for about 3 hours in this coffee shop. In fact, Jessica was the one who suggested that if she wanted a venue for her drama, she should wait until the wedding. She said, "Let's give her one she'll never forget." We made the decision to prepare everything. We received screenshots, pictures, and even a few videos from the event. It wouldn't be difficult to set up a lovely little presentation because Jessica had a buddy who handled AV at the venue. What was the highlight of this planning session, though? Watching Jessica become all heated up about exposing Val. It seemed to me that she had been anticipating this. She was talking about what a horrible person Val was at one point. Something connected between us as her eyes sparkled and her cheeks flushed. We both sensed it. That strain, the chemistry. However, we took no action. The days that followed were difficult. It felt like being in some kind of weird farce to seem regular around Val while knowing all this garbage. She's there discussing our future, pointing out table settings, and inquiring about our honeymoon plans. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking about how I'm going to blow her whole world apart. The most challenging aspect? In fact, she appeared to be looking forward to the wedding, as in truly joyful. I would occasionally catch myself on the verge of feeling guilty about our plans. Then I'd recall those texts, that dazzling dress and DJ douchebag arrogant face, and any guilt would simply vanish. Additionally, Jessica would send me another screenshot or mention something else Val had said behind my back whenever I began to doubt myself. Finding out that your fiancé deemed you dull in bed to her coworkers is the best way to stop compassion. 3 days remained till the wedding. And believe me when I say that it's difficult to pretend to be normal when planning someone's public humiliation. Val was rushing around, anxious about last-minute preparations, including clothing fittings, vendor calls, and other things. In the meantime, I'm working on what we started referring to as Operation Festival Fallout in covert meetings with Jessica and her AV friend Kyle. By the way, a quick shout out to Kyle. When Jessica told him what was happening, this guy was a living legend. He didn't merely consent to assist. He went all in. It became out that he had also been cheated on before. He therefore lived for this scheme of retaliation. He also knew exactly how to set everything up without appearing suspicious because he worked at the venue. It was a rather straightforward strategy. I would make a special toast to my new bride throughout the reception. Kyle would have screenshots, pictures, and even some videos that people had sent us from the rave queued up on the large screens at the venue. However, time was crucial. We needed to wait until all the important photos were done. The photographer was not someone I wanted to waste my parents' money on, and that poor guy undoubtedly spent a fortune on this wedding, following her dad's speech. This is where Jessica's situation started to get interesting. We were planning and spending a lot of time together. I won't lie either. The intensity of the chemistry was growing. She was sitting so close to me that I could almost smell her perfume one evening while we were at my house going over the data on my laptop. It was also far superior to the cotton candy body spray Val usually wore, I must say. You know what would really drive her crazy if you kissed me right after exposing her? Like right there in front of everyone, Jessica added, looking up at me. I won't lie, but I chuckled at her audacity. For a moment, my brain went into short circuit. Jessica was so hot. Green eyes and tall red hair, the type of female that naturally looks good, in contrast to Val, who looked at me while preparing to go to the grocery shop for 2 hours. But I played it cool. You sure you want to get engaged like that? You may also be judged by others. Trust me, I've been wanting to do this for months, she said with a sly smile. She treats you like a backup plan by talking about you to everyone. You're worthy of better. Then she put her hand on my leg and holy crap, the stress was unbelievable. However, we took no action. Not quite yet. We were both aware that we had to wait, make the retaliation even more delicious. The following several days were a haze of covert planning and wedding preparation, Val's incessant chatter about how wonderful everything would be and how we will be the greatest pair ever, among other things, was becoming more tiresome. She continues to text DJ Douchebag in the meantime. In their group conversation, Jessica gave me screenshots of Val boasting that she will attempt to get together with him after the honeymoon. We had the rehearsal dinner the evening before the wedding. I nearly felt horrible after hearing Val's father's moving statement about embracing me into the family. Then, after dinner, I recalled all the screenshots of Val calling me safe and boring while slinking out to the restroom for the 10th time that evening. To ensure everything was in order, Jessica and I met with Kyle one last time. The slideshow was ready. The sound quality was flawless. Yeah, we had audio. The timing was meticulously arranged, and Val had left some really damning voicemails for Voltage. Jessica then revealed even another shocking revelation. She remarked nonchalantly, "I got a room at the hotel for tomorrow night. You know, in case you need somewhere to go after everything." The way she said it, looking up at me through her eyelids, yes, she wasn't only providing a place to stay. And what do you know? I didn't even feel bad about the thoughts running through my mind after everything Val had done. Val was unconscious in our bed when I got home that evening, most likely after the rehearsal supper. There on the nightstand was her phone. Notifications are still being received. Voltage's name appeared. "After the honeymoon, I can't wait to see you, sweetie." That was the time. Any last questions? I had simply disappeared. Tomorrow wasn't only going to be the end of my romance with Val. This would be the start of something new. A better one. That night, I slept on the couch, in part because I couldn't bear to be near her, but mostly because I was too excited about what was going to happen. Jessica started emailing me jokes about retribution and karma, and we remained up late, organizing the final arrangements. "Tomorrow is going to be epic," was the final text I received from her that evening. "I hope you're prepared to play the lead in the most amazing wedding drama ever." She didn't realize how correct she was, man. The wedding morning felt unreal. F woke up on my couch, couldn't sleep close to Val after everything, and I momentarily lost track of the day. After that, my phone began to overflow with texts. "Val is sending me. Adorable. Can't wait to be your wife." I provide updates on Operation Festival Fallout to Jessica and my groomsmen via text. Arrived early at the location to check on Kyle. The man had surpassed himself. The wedding slideshow is set up on 3 enormous screens. The audio setup is flawless. Everything is prepared for use. As the last tech check was being performed, Jessica sneaked in wearing her bridesmaid dress and looked amazing. And let me tell you, Jessica looked stunning in her outfit, even though Val was the bride. "You ready for this?" With a look that made my heart skip a beat, she asked. Additional screenshots from that morning were brought by her. Val was still texting Voltage, talking about meeting up after the honeymoon. This girl's fucking audacity. The ceremony was weird, standing there in my tux, watching Val walk down the aisle with this fake, innocent look on her face. Her father looked proud as she sobbed. Poor guy. Spent $50,000 on this garbage show, and our entire family and circle of friends observing, as if it were a moment of beauty. Val's promises were an entirely new level of nonsense. All this nonsense about eternal love and loyalty, and how, until she met me, she had no real understanding of what love was. As I stand there, I'm thinking about the screenshots where she calls me safe and boring. Jessica was attempting to contain her laughter while seated in the front row. We got through the ceremony. I do, I said. For what was going to happen next, it had to be made legal. Took every picture. I went to the reception because I wanted to give my parents the best value for their money from the photographer. This is when stuff gets good. Everything was perfect. Val was in full bridal mode, showing off her ring, dancing with her parents, portraying the perfect wife. Speeches were then scheduled. Her dad went first, talking about what a great couple we were, how happy he was to welcome me to the family. Val's sister spoke passionately about real love. It was then my time. I stood up, picked up the microphone, and looked at Jessica. She gave me a slight nod. I want to raise a glass, I murmured, watching Val grin at me from our love table. A picture is worth 1,000 words, you know. I decided to share some images that truly capture Val's personality, rather than giving a lengthy speech. Kyle struck the lights. The screens became animated. First image. Val is grinding on volts in the DJ booth, hardly dressed. Second photo, their wording. Conversations about meeting up. Third image. Footage from the rave that shows them vanishing into the rear chamber. The room fell silent. Val's expression turned from surprise to fear in roughly 2 seconds flat. Her mom gasped so loud I thought she was going to pass out. There's more. Now that I was really into it, I went on. Let's hear what the bride genuinely feels about her new spouse. Kyle played Val's inebriated voicemail to Voltage, in which she claimed that she was only content with me because I was uninteresting and modest, but that he was her true passion. Val sprang to his feet and said, "Switch it off." However, Kyle, who was a true legend, simply turned the volume up. "What's wrong, babe?" I asked into the mic. "I thought you wanted an audience for your festival life. You told Voltage that, right?" Now her father stood with a flaming face. Her mother was in tears. The majority of the attendees were either covering their mouths in shock or filming on their phones. Val ran up to me and sobbed, trying to hide the fact that it wasn't what it appeared to be. "We can discuss this." That's when I revealed the last secret. "And the part about getting together after the honeymoon?" "Yes, I also saw those texts. I will no longer be here to boring you, so don't worry." I passed the mic to the DJ. Our DJ, not Voltage, ha ha ha, loosened my tie and marched straight over to Jessica. She stood up, the lovely little grin on her face, and I did what I'd been dying to do for weeks. In front of everyone, I grabbed her and gave her a kiss that was, let me tell you, electrifying. It was far superior to any kiss I had ever shared with Val. The whole room exploded, partly gasping, half cheering. Val was screaming something, but honestly, with Jessica in my arms, I couldn't hear anything else. We walked out together hand in hand, leaving Val standing there in her $7,000 dress, with her ruined makeup and her ruined reputation. Later, I heard that she attempted to accuse me of lying, but Kyle had already connected the screens to the video system at the venue. Everything was recorded, including her outburst. As we left the reception area, with the sounds of mayhem echoing behind us, Jessica turned to face me. "Do you want to provide them a genuine topic of conversation? Remember the hotel room she'd booked? Yes, we used it effectively, but first we had to pass through the lobby, which was unusual. Imagine this, my tux and I, bow tie undone. Jessica in her bridesmaid dress, both of us practically running to the elevator while wedding guests were still arriving for the reception. The glances we received were invaluable. The finest aspect? We ran into Voltage in the lobby. No joke. This clown actually showed up at the hotel, probably thinking he was going to be Val's little side piece after the reception. After seeing us, he recognized me from the pictures and went completely blank. Jessica, total queen that she is, just smirked at him and said, "Sorry. She's a bit busy having her wedding wrecked right now." My phone was exploding with hundreds of alerts when I entered the room. Val phoning and texting incessantly. Her friends sending furious messages. My friends expressing congrats. Strange wedding attendees who'd videotaped everything, previously publishing it on social media. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. Not going to go into too much detail trying to keep this somewhat PG-13, but let's just say Jessica had been holding back some feelings for a long time. We eventually checked our phones at 4 a.m. goddamn. At the reception, Val had lost his mind. She made an effort to persuade everyone that I was lying, and that the pictures weren't real after we left. All that BS, but then some genius. Most likely. Through the venue's speaker system, Kyle began playing the audio of her voicemails. Her mom was having a complete breakdown when she attempted to scale a table to unplug the speakers in her wedding gown, causing it to tear. Her dad was at the bar doing shots. To be honest, half of the visitors and my mood seemed to be recording everything or sharing real-time updates on the family group chat. The greatest part? The memes had already begun. The twins showed up. See, what Val didn't know was that Jessica had brought these two smoking, sexy twins. We were informed by the gym that they taught yoga, so we went to the hotel bar following the welcome. We hadn't even reached that part of the plan yet. These twins are posting stories from the hotel bar, tagging me, and obviously waiting for someone while Val is having her bridezilla moment at the reception. When Jessica sees this, she has a nasty, brilliant plan. She takes a pic of us in the hotel room, just like Clearly Together, if you understand what I mean, without being explicit, and post it with the caption, "Apologies, ladies. Might be a touch late to the after party." Val lost her crap, started texting Jessica, calling her every name in the book. Jessica simply takes screenshots of everything and posts them again. The twins start posting thirst trap stories like waiting for the real party to start. The internet is eating this stuff up. The story went viral in our city's social circle by morning. Val's reputation in disarray voltages. DJ career presumably not helped by the fact that someone, possibly Kyle, had shared photos of him intentionally hooked up with an engaged woman. Around midday on the next day, we eventually left the room. And guess who's seated in the hotel lobby? While Val's friends were walking off shaming it through the lobby, looking like raccoons with their smudged makeup, the twins were looking brand new in their yoga gear. Being the whole chaos queen that she is, Jessica recommends brunch. Imagine this then. Me still in my wedding tux. Minus the jacket, Jessica in her bridesmaid dress, and two hot yoga twins having mimosas on the hotel patio, while wedding guests are checking out the looks we got. Priceless. Val tried to show up at the hotel, but security had already been warned. Once more, Kyle is coming in clutch. They stopped her in the lobby. She was screaming that she needed to talk to me because she was the bride, still in her ripped wedding dress, mascara all over the place. We watched from the patio as they escorted her out. It was me who said, "Fuck it, we should all go back to my place." When someone has been betrayed, who needs to be reasonable? Even though the place was still officially half Val's, one said it anyway. I could tell by the look in Jessica's eye that the revenge tour was just getting started. So after our lunch at the hotel, we all headed back to my flat. Jessica, myself, and the twins, Ashley and Amy. I was still wearing my shirt, slacks, and suit. Jessica, dressed as a bridesmaid, appeared to have experienced war, which we kind of had the entire way back, to be honest. Updates from the aftermath of the wedding started flooding my phone. It seems that Val had returned to her parents' house and was having a complete breakdown on social media, writing lengthy tirades about how Jessica was a backstabbing viper and how I had wrecked her special day. The irony of her complaining about backstabbing while she'd been sneaking off with DJ Douchebag was just perfect. We arrived to my house. Well, because Val and I have been living together, it is still legally our place, and Jessica immediately starts making herself at home. The twins are snooping about the flat in that adorable manner only attractive women can get away with it. And I'm just sitting there thinking about how bizarre this whole thing is. That's when Jessica finds Val's secret drawer in the bedroom. God damn, you guys recall all the festival stuff she'd been wearing to meet up with Voltage? It wasn't just for raves, you know. There were, like, numerous glittery clothes. These platform boots that certainly weren't for work, plus a whole bunch of other items I won't discuss since I don't want this article getting reported. The twins thought this was hilarious and decided to play dress up. Next thing I know, they're all trying on Val's festival clothes, snapping selfies, having the fun of their lives. Jessica found this super expensive bodysuit that Val had bought for the honeymoon and decided it looked better on her anyway. We hear keys in the door at that point. Val rushes in like she owns the place. I mean, technically her name was still on the lease, but come on, presumably expected to find me alone and miserable. Instead, Jessica is wearing her honeymoon lingerie when she enters. Me on the couch, the twins dressed for a festival, just living my best life. The noise she made. I had no idea that anyone could hit that pitch. What on earth is this? She yells. Crying all day left the mascara still smeared. Her hair is a mess, and she is still dressed from yesterday, looking like she'd been up all night, which she probably had. Oh, we're just having a little fashion show, Jessica says, staring her in the eye. Your stuff is adorable. Not very bride-like, though, is it? Val lunges for Jessica. But Ashley, or maybe it was Amy, steps between them. Honey, she adds in a really kind tone. Before you create any more drama, you might want to repair your makeup. You guys, there are already enough of videos online showing you losing it. The scream that came out of Val. She begins gathering her belongings and packing them in bags while sobbing that she never imagined I would harm her. The irony, I swear. She then loses it when she sees the twins dressed in her rave attire. Those are mine. She shrieks, attempting to clutch at them. We think they look like club gear, so Amy or Ashley simply spins away and asks, "Are they? Isn't that what you wore to hook up with that DJ?" Val turns to me, switching to victim mode instantly. "Please, baby." She bursts into tears. "It was a single error. This is something we can resolve. I cherish you." Jessica reveals the truth at that point. One mistake. Shall we play the other club films from last month for him? Or maybe the ones from Vegas? Jessica had a lot more dirt than she had initially admitted. Val's expression quickly changed from fake tears to fear. "You wouldn't," she murmurs. "Give me a try," Jessica says, pulling out her phone. I retained everything. Every snapshot, every video, every inebriated confession about all your tiny exploits. Want to see them, babe? Val actually leaves half of her belongings behind when she flees the flat. The door smashes so violently, we spent the rest of the day looking through Val's belongings. Yeah, probably not legal. But after what she did, whatever found receipts for hotel rooms, more club outfits, and, get this, a diary. Let's just say Voltage wasn't the only side item. Jessica officially moved in a week later. The twins started coming often, and Val. She attempted to hook up with Voltage once more, but he had already moved on to another girl, according to what I heard last. Don't you think karma is a bitch? It's been roughly 6 months since the wedding. To be honest, it wasn't the best non-marriage choice ever. It's been an incredible life. The apartment was completely renovated. All of Val's basic live laugh, love decor was removed, and the space was actually made to look respectable. Val, she's been on a complete downward spiral, man. She attempted to save face after the wedding fiasco by posting a lengthy tirade on Instagram about how I was controlling her and that she was escaping toxicity or something. Nobody bought it, especially after Kyle, absolute legend, leaked more videos from the rave. She ended up having to turn off her comments because people continued posting DJ jokes. She attempted to reconnect with Voltage, but it seemed that he had moved on to someone else. Last I heard, she relocated to Miami to rediscover herself, aka probably find more DJs. Her dad still sends me Christmas cards though, which is hilarious. The twins are still in our lives. They come over for what we call Chaos Sundays, basically breakfast that evolves into all-day pool parties at their property. Val watches all our social media from phony profiles and just loses it every time we upload images. Sometimes we posture in ways that mimic her past thirst trap articles simply to screw with her work's been intriguing. Had to deal with some awkward conversations since Val and I were both kind of known in our industry. Jessica, she is doing well, obtained a new position at a rival pharmaceutical business. Definitely couldn't continue working with Val and now earns more money. She also no longer has to pretend to enjoy Val's cheesy Starbucks postings. In relation to Val's former life, do you recall all of the wedding presents we received? Yes, we did keep them. Val's mother attempted to compel them to return them, but as they were addressed to both of us, half of them were actually mine. Gave Jessica's mother, who detested Val, the most of the expensive china, BTW, and used the remainder of the gift cards to equip our apartment. After Val departed, Zeus, the cat, finally quit being like a jerk. It turns out that he simply didn't like her enthusiasm. Now he's the most relaxed pet ever. Even lets the twins pet him when they come around. Animals? No, dude. And do you recall our planned honeymoon? Bali's 5-star resort. Her parents covered all of the costs. Yes, I went with Jessica. In fact, Val's father insisted, said that because he was unable to receive a return, someone ought to enjoy it. The look on the hotel staff's faces when we explained why I was there with a different woman than the one on the reservation. The highlight of it all. In fact, I'm content, as in truly joyful. Principles, to constantly claim that I was predictable and uninteresting. But turns out, I just needed someone who appreciated me. Ironically, Jessica and I occasionally attend raves, but we also spend time playing video games at home. We can do fancy date nights, or just crush a pizza and watch movies. It's just easy. Actually, I received a text from Val last week. She was inebriated, obviously, and going off about how she made a mistake and misses what we had. I just emailed back an image of me, Jessica, and the twins at a pool party with the caption "new phone." Who is it? Maybe that was petty, but after everything she put me through, worth it. So that concludes this bizarre tale. In Miami, Val is by himself, probably still trying to slip into DJs, DMs, voltages, or whatever aspiring DJs do. And me living my best life with a woman who actually appreciates me, surrounded by amazing friends, and at last, without the energy of that basic bitch. Last week, Val's cousin sent me a message in an attempt to guilt trip me by saying that I've changed and that I'm not the kind person she knew. Sent her back a picture of me with 5 girls in a pool. Told her she's right. That person perished at the altar. And honestly, good riddance. The new me is having considerably more fun. I would still be stuck in a marriage with someone who didn't prioritize me if Val hadn't cheated. Hey there though, loss. I'm simply living life like a freaking rock star now. No attachments, no drama, no hassles. Life is good, read it real good. Edit, gee goddamn. This went viral. Again, rip my inbox, edit. Thanks for all the prizes, but stop contacting me DMs, asking for the twin socials FFS, third edit. Yes, we're considering of making the Crazy Sundays a weekly podcast. Keep an eye out. Final edit. Videos of weddings were requested by several of you. For legal reasons, I'm still unable to share them, but believe me, they're being stored for something great. Maybe our 1 year, not a wedding anniversary celebration.